Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us at VARC Solutions here for this webinar, where we're going to talk about tips on how to hire a QuickBooks bookkeeper. And just for a little bit of context in terms of like, why am I talking? Why this specific topic? VARC Solutions, we are a bookkeeping company. We've been doing this for about 25 years, and because of that, we have probably more opportunities than normal to hire bookkeepers. And so we've learned a few things about the process. And as we work with clients, some people have in-house bookkeepers, some people hire a CPA firm, some hire folks like us. But at the end of the day, if you've got somebody that you're trying to hire internally, it really helps to get somebody good. In this day and age, in this market, it's really, really hard to find good people. And so really the goal of this webinar is to just take some of those lessons learned along our way and help enable you to get better people to do your books, okay? Because we all deserve better books. And so that's what this whole topic is about. Let me just go ahead and go to the agenda slide. And we're going to touch on all of these points throughout this webinar. We're going to talk about past experience, industry experience, certifications, a few different ways that we typically test candidates, art and science of bookkeeping, because there's a little bit of both. We'll talk about background checks, separation of duties, and I'm even going to throw in an extra bonus tip at the very end there. As we get going, if you have questions during the webinar, you have the chat panel. Somewhere on your screen, you should have a little chat icon. If you don't see that, it's okay. There's a question panel, and that's also a great way to be able to ask questions. Throughout the webinar, we'll answer some of those questions, hopefully in the content, but if you have questions that you post, we'll answer those questions live on the call. At the end of the webinar, we'll also stay around for a few extra minutes, so if anybody has any lingering questions, and if you don't get all your questions answered, leave your contact information or at least your name, and we'll have your information on the registration list, and we can reach back out to you after the webinar. Feel free to, the GoToWebinar has a couple other different ways of interacting. There's a raise hand icon, and that lets me know you've got a question, and we could always unmute you. You could ask your question live, and then make sure that gets answered. So real quickly, my name is Brad White. I'm the CEO of VARC Solutions, and most of my career in leadership has also at some level involved hiring. I've been in the room doing the interviews. I've been the one evaluating candidates as well. So I do have a lot of experience doing this. And again, that's part of the goal, is to translate that into how that can help you when you're doing your own hiring for a bookkeeper. So let's talk about the first big picture category when evaluating candidates for a bookkeeping position. The first and most important thing is that the experience in the exact role that you're looking for is preferred. I mean, I probably should say required, but I would just generally say it's preferred. We can always find good people and train them and show them how to do a job. And if you've got a really good person that can ask questions and learn, they can absolutely rise up to that role. But from my experience, if you're hiring a bookkeeper, you should hire someone whose immediate prior position was bookkeeping, okay? Not necessarily an office manager, not an AP clerk, not a payroll clerk, literally somebody that has on their resume bookkeeper, okay? They could say bookkeeper, they could say part-time bookkeeper, they could say full charge bookkeeper, but they should say that they're a bookkeeper if that's what you're trying to hire, okay? Now, if you need an office manager, that's great. Hire an office manager that has other experience. But if you're hiring a bookkeeper for your team, then you should be looking for the words bookkeeper on their most immediate prior experience. And the reason why I say that is this. We primarily work with small to medium-sized companies, okay? So we're looking for bookkeepers that are great at working with small to medium-sized companies. If you hire somebody that's been working in corporate America, for 20 years, and they've been a senior accountant, they've been a level 2 account manager, they've been an AP clerk or a payroll clerk, what that typically tells me is that they're working for a larger company, and the accounting in a larger company is not only different than in a small business, It's also much, much more specialized. You know, if in a large company, you might have, you know, let's say you had a company that had at least 200 employees. There may be 5 to 7 people that are somehow involved in accounting, and each person is doing very, very small parts of what you might need in a small business. Because in a small business, you need that bookkeeper to do all of the roles of a bookkeeper, not just AR, not just AP. So that's why you don't look for the accounting manager, senior accountants, those types of titles. If you're looking for a small business bookkeeper, look for somebody that says bookkeeper in the title. Okay. And like I said, size does matter. If their last company that they worked for was a Fortune 100 company or a Fortune 500 company, and you are a small business, it's probably not going to be an apples for apples type of taking their prior experience and applying it to your role. Okay. So the other component here in terms of prior experience is this bookkeeping experience should be recent. I mean, literally in the last year to 2 years. We do see, you know, resumes, and we interview candidates all the time where, yeah, 10 years ago they did bookkeeping, okay? Or 5 years ago they did bookkeeping, but what they've done in the meantime is either no work, or maybe they did something completely unrelated to bookkeeping, completely unrelated to accounting. And I'm not saying that it's impossible for somebody to stay up to speed with what's going on in bookkeeping and accounting, or stay up to speed with what's going on in QuickBooks. But if you're not living in it every single day, you will absolutely lose some of that knowledge. You won't be up to speed on all the new features and all the changes and all the things that you need to be able to do. So I always look for bookkeeping experience that's in the last 1 to 2 years at a minimum. Anything farther out than that, and you're really taking a risk on somebody's having to relearn a lot of new things. Okay, so like I said, if you have questions about this as we go, feel free to use the question panel. But I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next category. So the second thing that I look for when hiring a bookkeeper is industry experience. Now, again, all this is relative, but let's say you're a construction company. Okay, that could be a roofing, that could be a fence, that could be a general contractor. Roofers are kind of special, right? There's a certain things that they have to do that other industries don't have to do. If you're in a restaurant, if you own a restaurant, the accounting that you're doing and the bookkeeping that you're doing, yes, at the core, there's some similarities. But if you're hiring somebody that's spent 20 years in oil and gas, that's not going to translate very well into a restaurant or a food and beverage type of industry. Property management have CAM adjustments. They've got tenant, leaseholds. You've got, taking the utilities and applying those to your tenants. I mean, there's so many things that are very, very unique and special. Take a brokerage business. You know, whether you're a realtor or maybe you're any other sort of insurance broker, where not only are you doing your job, but you've got money coming in, you've got commissions getting paid out, you might have partners that are getting splits. All these different things are very, very unique and special, and it does absolutely matter. Inventory warehouse. Okay, I mean, forget about just general accounting, right? Now you've got inventories, you've got stock takes, you've got end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year, inventory balance reconciliations, you've got shrinkage, you've got all of these things, again, that are very, very unique. So I'm not going to belabor the point. All I want to say here is that if you are in a certain industry, your best bet is going to be to find a bookkeeper that has worked in that industry. Okay, now they absolutely could have been an office manager in that industry. They could have played another role like business development in that industry. You need at least some experience in your industry. Otherwise, they're going to have to not only learn accounting or learn your business, but they're going to have to learn your industry. And there's a pretty big learning curve in a lot of different industries. So industry experience matters a lot. All right, the next tip is certifications. So I can't really stress this enough. Most of the candidates that we interview for bookkeepers don't have any certifications, okay? And I've got to imagine that for you that are listening in or watching, the same is probably true of you. You're interviewing candidates. doesn't really how many years of experience they've got. If you're looking for certifications, they probably don't have any. Okay. So the question is, what should you be looking for? Like, what should you be asking candidates about in terms of certification, and why in the world does it even matter? Okay. So the way that I like to explain this is there's really two categories of certification. There's user certification, okay, which is great, and there's pro advisor certification. And you'll probably see that on occasionally, right? Occasionally you'll see that on a resume. User certification basically says, I have taken some training, I've passed a test, and generally speaking, I should be able to go into QuickBooks and kind of move around the software. Okay, it doesn't mean I'm a CPA, it doesn't mean I can do taxes, it doesn't mean I know what debits and credits are and all the other kind of accounting lingo-ish type of things that are out there, but it probably does mean I can get in and I can write a check, I can enter a bill, I can pay a bill, I can invoice a customer, I can get paid and make deposits. A user certified person should at least be able to get in and just navigate around the software. Okay. Again, they might have to learn more about your business, learn more about your industry, but they should at least be able to get in and not have to fumble their way around in the software just to use the basic features. Okay. Now, payroll might be another story. You know, just because I'm a certified user, if I've never done payroll before, that's a whole different beast. I mean, that may be another big learning curve if somebody has never done payroll before and you need them to do payroll. If somebody's never done sales taxes before, that could be a gap as well. So user certification doesn't mean they know everything, okay? It doesn't mean they know more deeply in certain categories of accounting and bookkeeping, but it does suggest a general sense of overall capabilities. It's better than just having a diploma. It's better than just having a college degree. It basically says it was important enough for me to get certified. I invested the time, so I'm definitely a little bit more qualified than your average person, okay? And to be frank, most people are not user certified, okay? Most people are not certified at all. So if you saw a user certification on a resume, that's a pretty good sign you're getting somebody that could be good, okay? Now, let's talk about Pro Advisor certification. So Pro Advisor certification is more of let's call it a professional designation, okay? It's not just, hey, I'm not just a user. I should be able to not only use the software, but I should also be able to consult on the software. I mean, I should be able to give advice. Again, not CPA advice, not tax advice, but I should be able to reasonably get into the software and not just use it, but figure stuff out and help resolve issues, okay? Another way of saying this is a user certified person should be able to get in and use the software. The question is, what happens when you run into a problem? What happens when something goes wrong? Maybe sales taxes were paid incorrectly. Maybe you processed payroll and there was some hiccup in the process, and now we've got to back out payroll, reset it, and do it all over again, okay? Or maybe we're switching to QuickBooks payroll or some other payroll mid-year, and we've got to figure out what payroll year-to-date adjustments we need to put in so that the remaining paychecks for the rest of the year are right, okay? I'm just using these as examples. The point is, when problems happen, you need more than just a user certified person, okay? Pro Advisor certification would suggest that they can go in and figure that stuff out, figure out what happened first off, figure out what needs to be done to fix that solution, and then get you back on track. So again, if I had a choice between two candidates, one was user certified and one was Pro Advisor certified, I'm looking for the Pro Advisor certified candidate because that is another higher level of certification that you can, again, there's no guarantees, but this person is going to be more capable of doing that job than anybody else. Now, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but if you look at the right side of our slide, you'll notice that there's level 1 certification, there's level 2 certification, there's payroll certification, there's bookkeeper certification. And so even within the Pro Advisor category of certification, there's levels, right? Level 1 is good, level 2 is better. If you need somebody to do payroll, you should have them be payroll certified. Okay. Now, all of this is in what I want to say this is in a perfect world. Okay. We all have, sometimes you've got to fill a role and you have to hire somebody and they may or may not have these certifications. So part of what I'm talking about here is what should you be looking for? Okay. Now, let's assume you hired somebody and they didn't have these certifications. Okay. Me as an employer, I want my newly hired bookkeeper to get certified. Again, user certification would be the bare minimum. Go out and take the training, go take the test, be able to have that badge that says, hey, I'm at least user certified. But if I really, really want to work on their professional development, help them to be the best at what they could be so they can help me and my company better, I might push them and suggest, if you will, or encourage for them to go get Pro Advisor certified. So this is not only what you look for, this is also what you build into your staff development if you want them to be the best at helping you in that QuickBooks bookkeeping type of role. All right. Again, any questions, let me know. Feel free to raise your hand and we can go from there as well. All right. So here's the next thing that I want to talk about. Resumes are resumes. Okay. Recommendations are recommendations. They're all good. But the question is, do they really, really know the software? Okay, just because I've taken a test, just because I've gotten certified, does not know that I have a working knowledge of the software, period. Okay, from our experience, and by the way, we have a very rigorous process that we go through when we interview candidates for bookkeeping positions. Okay, and I mean, if I saw a resume, they didn't put anything about QuickBooks on there, they weren't a prior bookkeeper, I'm not even, quite frankly, I'm not even looking at them if it's a bookkeeping role that I'm hiring for. But now, let's take all of those candidates and put them over here. They don't count, right? Now I'm just talking about the candidates that are sitting in front of me that did have a resume that said they knew QuickBooks, that maybe, or maybe, maybe they did have something that said that they're certified. Those are the candidates that I'm talking about right now in this 8 out of 10 statistic. Okay, so they passed all the initial tests. We've done a phone interview just to talk to them and make sure that they can communicate well. And now they're sitting in front of us. 8 out of those 10 candidates that said they knew QuickBooks do not know QuickBooks. Okay, and so hopefully that doesn't shock you. I don't know if that's your personal experience either, but I hope that that doesn't shock you. But the reality is that is exactly the truth. 8 out of 10 candidates that we interview say they know QuickBooks, they don't know QuickBooks. And so how do we figure that out? Well, we need to test them. Okay, now what do we test for? How do we test for it? So there's a couple just general categories here that I wanted to share. But first off, there's no substitute for speed and accuracy. Okay, if you're hiring a bookkeeper, you want them to be fast at what they do. Like, a reconciliation can take 1 hour or it could take 5 hours. I've seen the same reconciliation, coding, your banking credit card accounts, reconciling those banking credit card accounts. I've seen the same reconciliation take one person an hour, and I've seen that exact same set of books, an account, and reconciliation take 4 hours. So speed does matter. Now, part of that, there's a little bit of a give and take there, right? Because you want somebody that's paying attention. You want somebody that's being accurate. And so just because somebody takes a little bit longer to do a task doesn't mean they're worse, doesn't mean they're less proficient or less skilled. It could be that their just attention to detail is so much greater. They're spending more time checking and rechecking and rechecking. And quite frankly, those are good qualities in a bookkeeper, okay? So the best of both worlds, though, is they know both, right? In other words, they can work through at a fast pace and be accurate at the same time. Okay, that's one very important area to test. The other is basic accounting concepts. If you wrote a check and it was for rent expense, asking a basic question like, what financial statement would that expense show on? If they say balance sheet, you need to say, thank you for coming, we'll let you know. If they say profit and loss or income statement, okay, they got that one right. Okay, I'm not talking about accounting concepts like, is an asset account a credit account or is it a debit account? I'm not talking about debits and credits. I'm just talking about like basic accounting concepts. Like when you make a deposit, is that income or is that maybe an offset against either account receivable or undeposited funds, right? If you're in the software, you're using it every day, it's only going to be one of those three things. And if they say, oh, it's a draw or it's an expense, or that would show up on your P&L if it's a deposit, and you're talking about the check register impact. Okay, those are some basic accounting concepts that you can test. Another category, again, that I think is incredibly important is, can this person see what isn't there? Okay, can they see what is not there? If you give them, so like one of the things that we do is we give candidates a register test, okay, literally a bank register. And we ask them to find the mistakes because we pre-build some mistakes into our bank account register for them to find. So here's the thing. If I've created a bank account register that has at least 10 mistakes in it and they catch one, at the end of that interview, you say, thanks for your time, we will let you know. If somebody checks all 10 of the boxes off and says, I found all 10 of the mistakes, you got a pretty good candidate there, okay? So there are some not subjective, like literally qualitative and quantitative tests that you can give a candidate to see if they're gonna be good in this role. But again, I can't understate this as much, I can't understate this enough. It's very easy for someone to pull out a calculator and add up totals and say these things balance. It's a lot harder for somebody to see that something shouldn't even be in that register at all, or that there's some entries that were duplicated, or an expense that was written to a customer, right? There's those types of things. You just have to see it. It's one of those things where you either see it or you don't, and you want somebody that can see the stuff that's not there or see the stuff that shouldn't be there. And that goes beyond just, I'm just going to go sit in front of a computer and do my bookkeeping, okay? And then the last in terms of the testing is rushing versus overthinking versus having a good balance, okay? So the register test that I'm talking about, if someone, like I time that test, okay? So I will literally say, hey, here's this register test. I'll give them the explanation, I'll give them the instructions, and then once they start kind of behind the scenes, I'm hitting a stopwatch. I want to know how long it takes for them to go through that register test. Now, ballpark, it's 3 to 5 minutes on average when we've seen it, when I've done it, when really good candidates have done it, it's about a 3 to 5 minute test. If somebody finishes in 1 minute and misses 9 out of 10 things, not only does it say that they don't have attention to detail, it also tells me that they're rushing through it. Because when I give those instructions, I say, take as long as you need. There's no time limit on this. When you're done, you let me know. Okay, so if somebody finishes in 1 minute, they are rushing and they're going to rush through your books and likely make a lot of mistakes. Contrary to that, I've also given people that exact same test and they've taken 10 minutes instead of that 3 to 5 minute kind of sweet spot, and they still haven't found 9 out of 10. They still might only find 3 or 4. So what I'm looking for is somebody that gets 7 or more, and they do take in that 3 to 5 minute time frame, because that lets me know I've got somebody with at least sufficient detail. They can see what's not there, and they're not taking forever to figure that out, okay? And they're also not rushing, okay? So that's just a test, so to speak, that you can give. And by the way, if after the webinar you put in the question panel and you'd like a copy of that register test that we use, I'm happy to share that with you. It's not some fancy proprietary thing. It's something that we built on our own, but it's also, I think, could be very helpful for you if you'd like a copy of that. Just let us know. Now, the second thing, and again, I think this is super, 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 super important. I could say super 5 more times to make it more important. It's super important. You need to get that candidate in front of QuickBooks and have them show you some things, okay? The reason why this is so important, not only is there QuickBooks Desktop, which somebody might have experience with, and QuickBooks Online, which they might have experience with, those two experiences don't often translate to the other. So somebody might be really, really good at QuickBooks Desktop, but they might not know how to maneuver around QuickBooks Online, or vice versa. So let's say that you're hiring for somebody and you guys use QuickBooks Online. Somebody might on their resume say they knew QuickBooks, but they may not qualify whether that's desktop knowledge or online knowledge. And quite frankly, I don't even care. I'm still going to test them. So what we do is we take candidates and we put them in front of a computer with a mouse, with a keyboard, and we say, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go into this QBO sample file, and I would like you to just go enter a bill from a vendor. Okay, now hopefully they're going to say, any particular vendor in mind? Okay, yes, one of these vendors that's in the vendor list, and they will then just immediately go vendors, enter bill, and they'll start filling it out. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. If I said then, okay, great, that's fine. Can you go create an invoice for a customer? And they should literally go straight to the customer list, create the invoice, or if they're in QBO, click the big plus sign in the sky and have it, create a new invoice. They should immediately go to these things and then start filling it out. Can you write a check for me to, Bob's Grill? They should go straight to writing a check, filling it out. And if Bob's Grill is not in there, they should click auto, add vendor, start filling it out, hit save, come back, fill out the check. That's what's supposed to happen. If they are standing in front of you or sitting in front of the computer and you've said, go enter a bill for me, and they spend a minute and a half trying to find the button to go add a vendor. If they spend a minute and a half trying to find where the vendor list is in the first place, this is not the candidate for you. Where anything is, okay? If they are fumbling around and they don't, that is a very, very true sign that first and foremost, they do not know the software. Number two, they might not know anything about QuickBooks, anything. Like, yeah, you're hiring for QuickBooks Online. They might not know QuickBooks Desktop either, quite frankly. A lot of people put stuff on a resume, and that's why we test. Our best candidates, the ones that we hire and do our client books, we say enter a bill, write a check, enter an invoice, and I guarantee you what they're going to be doing within a split second is going and creating that transaction, no questions asked. They're just going to go right to it. Okay. Now, the reason why, again, this is super, super important is because if somebody came to you and they said that they're a bookkeeper and they know the software, you're probably going to pay them a little bit more than somebody who has absolutely no experience, no QuickBooks knowledge. And so if you're going to pay a premium for somebody that has experience, you shouldn't have to teach them how to do the basics of bookkeeping or QuickBooks. Again, you're going to still have to tell them a little bit more about your company, your industry possibly, right? But you shouldn't have them starting from scratch. And I hope you see some of this stuff coming together here. This is why it's super important to have somebody that has some industry experience. This is why it's super helpful to have someone who has recent experience, because just because they use QuickBooks in a company 8 years ago and they haven't done it since, I guarantee you that's the person that's going to sit in front of you and they're going to fumble around because the software has changed, things have moved all over the place. The software is just incrementally changing over time, and those things make it really, really hard. All right, so that is testing them. Now, let's talk about what I call the art and science of bookkeeping. Okay, so if someone said that I can code transactions in a bank account, that's the science, that's the transactional, that's the routine, that's the what I'm doing every single day. Yes, I can go in and I can code a bill, I can code a deposit, I can code transactions. Yes, I can do bookkeeping, okay? But that's the science part of it, and you need that. You absolutely need somebody that can do that. But there's also an art to it, okay? And so I can code correctly is the art, okay? So anybody can sit in front of a computer and they can do data entry. The question is, are they doing the data entry correctly, okay? And there's some nuance here, and that's why we call it an art. Understanding business is crucial for doing small business bookkeeping, okay? I mean, I'm just going to give you a few examples, but let's say that you had a truck loan, okay, and you got a loan statement from that truck. Well, at some point, you're going to see a payment from your checking account probably that's going against that loan. Well, it's not a truck expense, okay? You're paying off a liability. You're paying off either a short-term or a long-term liability there to pay down the balance of that loan. But as most people know, when you pay an auto loan, part of that's principal and part of that is interest. Well, being able to split the principal and interest that comes from the loan statement is helpful. Knowing that that is something that needs to be done is helpful, okay? Knowing that depreciation on that truck needs to be recorded over time as well is something as well. So just getting in front of a computer and doing data entry is the science. The art is knowing what should be done, when it should be done, how it should be done, and being able to discern between those everyday situations that we're dealing with and how that applies to accounting concepts. Okay, so little things like, you know, what happens when you get a chargeback on a customer credit card charge? Okay, what happens if you invoiced a client and then charged their card but it came back declined? Or maybe you did that but the payment didn't sync to your QuickBooks. Every 2 months when we're charging clients credit cards for work, there's some hiccup just in the automatic online process, and we have to know how to record that payment that just didn't sync back. Like, in other words, it happened, we're going to get the money, but the system doesn't know that we actually did get paid. So how do you resolve that? So again, that's where like that pro advisor certification helps, but that's also where knowing the art side of bookkeeping can really help balance the science part. Okay, so that is the art and the science of bookkeeping. All right, and I'm just blowing and going. So again, if you have questions, feel free to fire those off in the questions panel. Let us know. Here we go. Let's keep going. Background checks. Now, why in the world are background checks important? Well, hopefully I don't really have to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Background checks are critical. If you've got somebody that's working in your accounting and they're dealing with money, okay, you need to make sure that you've done a background check on them. There's really a couple of reasons why, but let's talk about the first one, which is past criminal records. Some people who've stolen and gotten convicted of that crime, obviously it's on record. You would never want to hire somebody that for this type of role, okay? But you might do a background check and you might see things like DWIs, you might see those types of things. Speeding tickets you might find if you do the DMV records as well. But you're looking for somebody that has a pretty clean record if you're looking for somebody that's going to come in and not be a risk, okay? Now, I think people that have gotten away with that stuff before, or maybe they've gotten convicted and they're still out there trying to earn a living, they're hoping that you don't do a background check, okay? But I insist that you do. The other thing that's really super important to do is do a credit history, okay? So again, this might not have anything to do with their ability to do this job. However, it is a risk factor. So, you know, and by the way, again, let's be real here. If you hire somebody straight out of college, maybe they got an accounting degree and they're coming straight out of college and they have, you know, they had to pay their way through college. They didn't have parent support. They didn't have scholarships. I mean, they may walk out of college with $100,000 in debt. Okay, I'm not saying that that's a red flag. It's not. Somebody that puts himself through college, pays their own way, there's obviously a ton of positives to that. There's a ton of great things there. But if you're hiring somebody that's 5 years out of college, 10 years out of college, 15 years out of college, and they've got $200,000 worth of debt, and you're putting them in front of a computer that has access to not only your accounting records, but your bank account and your credit card accounts, there is a risk there that you do not want to take on, okay? Because it's just too tempting. And people are people. Doesn't matter how much you trust this person, people are people, and this is a risk that you may not want to take, okay? One other thing that we tend to find when we do background checks, and again, we're not like looking for this, it just sometimes shows up when we see it on the background check, and that is how many addresses are on file in the last 5 years for this candidate. Like literally, have they been in the same home for the last 5 years? Or have they had maybe 2 houses or maybe 2 apartments? If so, those are fine, right? Those are great. Okay, and I'm going to qualify a few of these because again, we've seen so many different variations on this. Here's another okay, fine thing, right? Let's say you're hiring a lady, okay, and she is the wife of someone who's been in the military, and she's staying by her man, right? Her man is on a military base, and that person gets transferred multiple times throughout the course of their military career. You're going to see some movement, okay, and I think that's totally fine. What you don't want is you get the background check, you look at the resume, you look at the addresses on file, and they've had 15 different addresses in the last 3 years. I don't know about you, that's just not a great sign for me. That just tells me that they move around too much. And I don't even, quite frankly, want to know the story. I don't want to know the reasons why. I don't think it's relevant to ask why. But I think it's a risk factor if someone has that much movement. It just tells me that they're a rolling stone and probably not the most stable person in the world. Okay, now if I'm going to put somebody in front of QuickBooks and have them do bookkeeping, I want them to be stable. Okay, I want them to be debt free or at least close to it. I want them to be stable, and I want them to have no criminal records. Okay. Alias is a whole nother thing that you sometimes will see on a background check. They'll say Mary also goes by Marilyn, things like that. Totally fine. Somebody that's got a last name, but they also have a maiden name. Totally fine. But what you don't want to see is someone who goes by Mary, is also going by Sally, and is also going by Jesse, and also going by any other aliases that don't seem to make perfect sense. Just a red flag. And again, I don't see that very often at all, but it is something to look for. Okay. All right. So that is background checks. All right. We are almost through the content. We're flying through this stuff. Hope you guys appreciate that. Don't want to waste anybody's time. We're going to get into what are called separation of duties. Now, at the core of separation of duties, it's not always about trust here. Okay. This is just about protection. Okay. This is about doing things well, and making sure that you're putting in controls so that you're eliminating the easiest ways for somebody to embezzle, steal, take money from you. Okay. So it doesn't matter whether or not you trust this person. It's about putting in the controls. Okay. Now that I've kind of said that, what I would like to say is don't trust anybody. So it doesn't matter who this person is. I don't want you to give undue trust to anybody that's going to sit in front of your computer and do bookkeeping or accounting for your firm. Okay. And by the way, I'm a pretty trustworthy person. I will trust somebody until they prove themselves untrustworthy. Okay, so that's my general slant in terms of half glass full, half glass empty. I prefer to trust and then find out later that they're not trustworthy. I don't assume that they're not trustworthy, but at the same time, don't trust them. Okay, put the controls in place so that you don't have to trust them. Now, I'm going to go one step further about this. Most small businesses, especially when they're small, they're starting to grow, but maybe the profitability isn't quite there. Maybe the revenue isn't quite where you want it to be. A lot of small businesses and a lot of small business owners will hire, quote unquote, their spouse. They will hire a family member. They'll hire a brother, maybe a child, an adult child, or maybe it's like a cousin or an uncle. If it's a family member, I still don't want you to trust that person to do everything without check. Okay, I think you should still have controls in place. And by the way, this is anecdotal, and I'm just telling you from our experience as a bookkeeping company. We have clients come to us and they have been embezzled. Okay, they have had stuff going on in their books that was found out later. Okay, and now they're coming to us going, help us get everything cleaned up, help us get everything right, help me trust my numbers again, and also help me put in those controls so that this doesn't happen again. Oftentimes, and I use often because, again, this is not statistical, I'm just saying on average, most of the time from our experience, most of the time it is somebody within the family. Okay, it is the mom. Okay, it is the daughter, it is the son, it is the stepsister, it is the cousin, it is the family member who did the crime. And a lot of times it's because they were trusted without check. They were trusted without controls. And quite frankly, a lot of owners, and I'm not saying this is you, but a lot of owners, they're like, look, I don't like this accounting stuff. I don't like this bookkeeping stuff. I just want somebody to do that so I don't have to even think about it. So I can go off and sell widgets. I can go build fences. I can put roofs on. I can go do architecture consulting. I can do, I want to just go do what I want to do and just let the bookkeeping people do what they do because I don't want to mess with it. That's when the problems happen, is because oftentimes the owner is not in tune with the accounting to the point where they could see anomalies, where they can see things that shouldn't be happening. But again, those are the best case scenarios where you are involved, you understand it, you are doing those things. But by putting in the controls and having separation of duties, it drastically reduces the risk regardless. Okay, so I've talked about this a lot, but let me just give you a few specific examples of what that separation of duties means. Okay, first and foremost, the only person that should be going to the mailbox and opening the mail is the owner. Okay, the owner should be doing that, not the accounting person, not the bookkeeping, not the office manager, not anybody else in the company. It really should be the owner. Okay, that's where mail is coming. That is where checks are coming. That is where bank statements are coming. If someone else is opening up the mailbox and pulling out the statements before you get them, or pulling out checks before you see them, they can do things with those checks and they can do things with those statements that could be a problem. Okay, so we always want the owner opening it up and then giving them as appropriate to whoever needs them. Second thing is, whoever's doing the data entry in the checkbook or the bank account or the credit cards should not be the one doing the reconciliations. Because again, if you're doing the entry and the reconciliations, you can make it work. Okay, even if you're stealing money, you can just make it work. You can magically make those reconciliations reconcile. Okay, so but if someone is doing something they shouldn't be doing and someone else is reconciling it, that's when you typically find that stuff is happening, and you can avoid that. Other common examples of separation of duties would be entering bills and having someone else pay the bills. Okay, so a lot of companies hire us, and we're doing, let's just say, general bookkeeping. We're doing coding and reconciliations, and sometimes we also assist our clients with paying bills. Okay, but even for us, we don't pay the bills. We enter the bill, we code the bill, we queue it up for approval, and then it's up to the client to say, yes, pay that one, pay that one, pay that one, pay that one. Okay, and either they're paying it or they've given us explicit approval to pay it. But again, why is this important? Okay, well, let's say I have a buddy of mine who invoices our company, and I am the data entry person, and I enter that bill, and then, well, gosh, I'm also the person that pays the bill, so I just go pay that bill. I've just now paid my buddy some money. Now, it could be legitimate, or it could just be me paying my buddy, and then now we're going to split the money after he gets the cash. Okay, so if you've got someone entering it and somebody else paying it, you've got someone to say, what's this bill about? Is there a contract? Is there a PO associated with it? Like, they can question it, and so it's a lot better. Separating invoicing customers from making deposits. Okay, someone that's invoicing and someone else that's making deposits is another good control, because when that money comes in, it needs to go somewhere. Does that deposit get applied to a specific customer open invoice, or am I just recording it as income? There's some mistakes that can go along there as well, but we want to make sure that we have separation of duties. The last thing I'm going to talk about related to separation of duties is what I call permissions. Okay, so let's say you've got somebody that's, maybe you're a small company. Okay, maybe you're really, really small, and you only have a few people in there anyways, And there's no such thing as separation of duties. It's like, I need this person to do all this stuff because otherwise, I'm just a one-person show and I'm doing everything, right? So even in a small company, you could put in place permissions that might allow someone to add transactions, but not allow them to edit or delete those transactions, okay? Or maybe you allow them to enter a check or create an invoice, but you don't let them print that invoice or print that check. Again, these are separation of duties. If somebody's entering checks, maybe I'm the person that comes in afterwards and I'm the one to print those checks. But see, when I'm printing them, I can make sure that they're legitimate. I can sign them only if they are legitimate. And if I have any questions, I go back and I question it. Okay. If someone is adding a transaction but they can't edit or delete it, again, it gives you an opportunity as an owner, as a manager, to check what was entered and make sure that it's right, or question the change or question the deletion. Somebody that has free reign and they can add, edit, and delete, and they can create and they can print, quite frankly, they can do whatever they want and you'll never ever know, unless you know about this little sneaky little thing called the audit trail, but we can talk about that later. So separation of duties, very, very important. All right, now I've got one more bonus tip. So those were the 7 tips on how to hire a QuickBooks bookkeeper. Here is my last bonus tip. And for those people that are listening that know QuickBooks, you're gonna laugh when you see this. You've already seen it on the screen, but this is one of those things that, quite frankly, nobody is paying attention to unless you really know the software. And that is that there is an uppercase B in QuickBooks. It is not uppercase Q, quick, lowercase books. It is quick with an uppercase B, books, okay? And I know that's so stupid, and I know it's such a small thing, but when you're looking at a resume and somebody says, I know QuickBooks, but they're misspelling QuickBooks, they're not uppercasing the B, to me, that is just a small, tiny, 1-dot red flag in the entire resume that I'm gonna evaluate when I consider this candidate. If they don't know how to spell QuickBooks itself, they're kind of telling me that they don't really know the software. Okay. Now, obviously, just because somebody can uppercase B doesn't mean they know the software. It doesn't mean they can get in and fly circles around the software. Okay. But again, when you're evaluating a candidate, you're taking all of these different signs and signals and rolling that into an overall concept of this employee or this candidate to decide if you're going to hire them. So if somebody did an incredibly good job on the test that I'm talking about, the register test, or you stuck them in front of QuickBooks and they nailed it, they truly nailed it, okay? Just because they did a lowercase b on a resume, I'm not gonna worry about that. But if they kind of fumble around the register test and they kind of fumble around in QuickBooks, and when they give me, and when I'm interviewing them and their questions are a little vague and maybe just not too specific, and they also have a lowercase b in their QuickBooks, to me, I'm like, that's the nail on the coffin. I'm kind of done here. Thanks, we'll let you know, okay? So hopefully what we've given you today is enough ammunition and enough basic background for when you're hiring a bookkeeper to evaluate them appropriately, okay? I'm gonna wrap up this webinar with a couple things. I wanna talk just briefly about us, and I wanna also make you one specific offer that I think hopefully will be valuable to you, okay? So as I conclude this webinar, VARC Solutions, we've been in business for 25 years. Our entire team is ProAdvisor certified. Okay, so that's one of the criteria that we have when we hire somebody. And if they've got basic certification, we want them to keep growing those certifications, because that helps, one, quite frankly, it helps them do their job, but it also helps them do a much better job for our clients. So we've got all the certifications out there. We're Elite QuickBooks ProAdvisor certified, we're online certified, desktop certified, payroll certified, all those things. I've kind of just got a picture of the team in front of you too, where you can kind of see everybody on our team, QuickBooks certified, and we've been doing this for 25 years. We serve clients nationwide. We think we do a pretty good job of that. But here's my offer to you. One of the offers was, again, that if you wanted that register test, let me know. I'm happy to share it with you. I'll give you the version that we give to the candidate. I'll also give you the version that is kind of like the what do you call that? The test guide that tells you what all the mistakes are so that you can call them out. And again, that's just one thing that we put somebody through in an interview. So my offer to you is this. If you are going to go out and hire, let's say you weren't going to hire us, you were going to go out and hire your own bookkeeper, okay, which is, again, totally fine. If you would like help evaluating that candidate and you would like a little bit of help from us, let us know. I can, at a bare minimum, I can go in and look at the resume and give you some feedback, or based on the resume, I can come back and say, hey, I would ask them a few details about this, okay? Or if you're just not sure and you literally have two candidates side by side and you're like, I just don't know, I can't figure out which one I should hire, happy to help, no problem whatsoever. So let us know. We've got our phone number on the slide there, 281-412-6914. You can email us at sales@varksolutions.com and just say, hey, Brad said he could help with a bookkeeper candidate evaluation. And again, I'm just going to take a short look at it. I can jump on the phone for a few minutes and give you some feedback, and that's really all it is. But hopefully that'll help you make that good decision. And then secondly, we would love to quote you on bookkeeping services. If you're looking for a bookkeeper, you're looking for somebody that has a solid team where they're not going to come in and do the job, leave 3 months later, and then have to redo a whole nother hiring and a whole nother set of training. If you'd prefer to outsource your bookkeeping to us, we would love to quote you on those services. We feel like our services are pretty reasonable. Our bookkeeping services start at $350. I think our average is right around $550 a month, and obviously it can go up depending on the complexity and how many accounts and how many entities. But if you'd love a quote, let us know, and we'd be happy to do that for you as well.